Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we have the embellishments video that I promised I'd be doing, and we're going to talk about all the different embellishments that Paladin can use, the best ones, what I suggest to use for which content, my favorites, and stuff like that. And of course you can make your own decision at the end of what kind of embellishments you want to use. So we're starting here, or we're just going to look at the crafting order thing, and maybe I will, in editing, add a bigger image to see these a little bit better. But we're going to go through all the plate armor, and then we're going to talk about the neck. We're going to talk about the weapon as well. So here we have the Unstable Frostfire Belt. This is the very first one on crafting orders. It happens to also be a very, very strong one. So what this does is your spells and abilities have a chance to inflict a lingering frostbark, dealing frostfire damage over 10 seconds. So putting a little dot of frostfire damage. Now, of course, fire damage is very pertinent in this expansion because we have rings. One that I'm wearing here, Diurna's Chosen, that does damage, and another ring that when fire damage happens, you can gain a shield, so a defensive firing as well, that drop from the raid. And so that gives you a little bit extra value on that because this is doing frostfire damage, does count as fire damage, and so it's giving you a little bit extra damage, a little bit extra shield if you have one of those rings. If you have both of those rings, this gets a little bit of an added bonus. And it's worth saying here at the top that many of these embellishments are tuned very close to each other within, a couple hundred DPS. And for the most part, there aren't really bad choices for PvE content with the PvE embellishments. There aren't really too many bad choices, but the Frostfire Belt, assuming you have one of the rings or both of the rings or whatever, or you plan to have one of the rings or both of the rings at some point, the Unstable Frostfire Belt kind of does kick into that next notch of like being really, really good. And so if you plan on having one of those rings, if you don't raid at all, then the Frostfire Belt falls down, quite a bit to like, third, fourth, fifth, depending on your stats and stuff. Again, this is all very high variance. With the ring, the Frostfire Belt stimulates the highest for me out of all the embellishments. But, again, if you don't have the ring, this has not great stats on it. High crit, low mastery, not the best stats for ret. So it's not that great otherwise. But if you have one of the rings, it just gains extra value. And that's why I'll be using this one because I have the ring. But if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be using it. So it is a little bit of a variance there. So it's like one of the things that it can be the best, but it also can be, mid or on the lower end, which of course, again, that's not a huge range. We're talking about a very fine-tuned range here. Let's go ahead and move on to the next stuff. These are the Infurious. That's the PvP stuff. The Frostfire Laggards. So if you're specifically a Mythic Plus player or outdoor world content player or whatever, you're moving place to place, whether that's pack to pack in a dungeon or you're just doing world quests, you're pulling multiple things, right? That's the key thing. You don't want to be fighting only one thing at a time for this. But damaging a new enemy grants you haste for 10 seconds, up to 5 stacks of that. A good amount of haste, so it's like 500. It probably scales up more, so it's probably 600 to 1,000 haste. So it's a lot of haste, but it's not good for single target at all. But it's good for multi-target. So if you're a Mythic Plus player, this could possibly be your number one thing that you want to be crafting, the Frostfire Laggards. If that's the content you're doing all the time, then having these, and of course you can take off an embellishment and put another one on. So you might just want to craft these just for Mythic Plus, right? These are very, very good for Mythic Plus, dungeons in general, and like I said, outdoor content if you're pulling more stuff. These are very, very strong and very, very cool. I use these on the not PTR, on the beta, and they were even stronger. They changed the effect on them, but these are very, very strong for dungeons. Quite good. Next, we have 2 Tinker places. So that's the bracers, and then for the helmet, you do have to be an engineer to use these. These are kind of on the lower end. Again, that's a lower end of a very fine-tuned range for the most part. But these 2 are kind of on the lower end of it. They shouldn't be something that you're like dying to get. But if you're an engineer and you want to wear your helmet that requires engineering, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, that's a tier set place, so that could be a little bit rough. So maybe you want to wear your wrist instead. But I totally get that. But the number one thing I would say too is, if you are of the profession, you can make your own thing. There's nothing wrong with just using the thing that you can make yourself. Like there's some coolness in that. Next up, we're gonna have allied wrist guard and allied chest plate. Now, out of these two, the wrist guard is much better. Not again, much being a very that even shouldn't even be the word that I use, because it isn't. It's just better, right? I shouldn't say much better, because that implies that there's like this huge gap. But the allied wrist guards are quite good. These can simulate towards the top. So like if you don't have the ring, right, the Frostfire Belt value goes down. These wrist guards are going to be towards the top then of your choices. It's going to be like wrist guards. We're going to talk about lariat. We're going to talk about the weapon enchants. This is going to be one of those. This is going to be like a top 4 if you don't have like the ring or whatever. The belt is still decent. It's still like on the verge of being with those, but with the ring, it kind of sets it apart. But these wrist guards are quite good. So this is always a fine choice to use this. Also, if you're more of a team player, obviously this is a raid item. If you're a Mythic Plus player, you're not going to get as much value out of the allied wrist guards. But if you're like a huge team player, this is giving your allies a buff as well. Oh, no, it doesn't. It just grants versatility for every ally in a 30-yard radius, stacking up to 4 times. Okay. Yeah. So, oh, no. I'm reading this wrong. I am reading this wrong. So this is only for yourself. So it isn't quite as good as I thought. I was like, if you're a team player, then this will be the best thing. But the wording got me there. Grants 46 versatility for every ally. I was thinking, oh, it's giving it to all your allies, but it's for every ally close to you. So it's just giving it to you. Okay, that makes sense, I guess. So it's just a versatility stat stick for yourself. It's still really good though. It simulates good. Obviously, the simulation wouldn't have taken into account your allies anyways. So it's still quite good, regardless of my inability to read that properly. It's still quite good for yourself. So again, it's like a top 4 one. You can easily use the allied wrist guards and be fine with that. Let's move on to the necklace. Miscellaneous, probably. Necklace. Search. Elemental Lariat. So the Lariat, this is going to be another one that's going to be like a number 2 or a number 3 probably if you simulate it out. This is just it's a very strong one, just naturally strong. It comes with the embellishment on it. You don't have to put it on it like most of these that we've talked about. And so you can put this one on. It just basically buffs up one of your gems and gives you like a stat boost, and it procs it often enough, and it's quite strong. You're going to see a lot of people using this, right, across all specs, and it's good for Ret too. It's good for everybody. It's just a solid one. We'll talk about a couple weapon ones here to wrap it up, and then I will do a wrap up. But we have, so here, if you craft or you have crafted like the Obsidian Seer Claymore, for example, you can add embellishments to this. They does not come with it, but you can add it. So there's healing darts. I'm trying to find, because there's another one too. There's like a silken lining here. Okay, so we have Fang Endurance and Silken Lining. The only reason I don't say to go for Silken Lining is there's a lot of times, especially in raid, if you're mythic raiding, you're below 90% health a lot of the time. And 90% is a pretty high threshold. Mythic Plus, you might be low a lot too. Time when there's like damage to your entire group. Basically, the harder content that you're doing, the less likely that Silken Lining is going to be good for you on your weapon. It's extremely strong, but it's just one of those things where you're just not going to be above 90% health if you're doing difficult content. Fang Endurance are, they're like another one of those top 3 kind of thing. So, in my opinion, right, Fang Endurance just do more melee damage, essentially. There's nothing special about it at all. You put it on your weapon, it does more melee damage. I have it on my weapon currently because I created my own weapon. Now, what I can tell you guys is how the things simulate for me personally, right? Again, these can be varied. Like something that simulates 1 for me could simulate like 4th for you. That's how close the variance is. So for me, the Frostfire Belt simulates the best. That's probably because I have the ring, right? That's why the Frostfire Belt simulates the best for me. So I'm going to have that crafted. The second best simulation for me personally is the Lariat. So I could have that made. However, my Fang Adornments on my weapon are only a little bit behind it. And I crafted my own weapon. Like I said, it's fine to like want to use the weapon that you crafted or use the armor that you crafted yourself, right? And so in that vein, I'm probably just going to use my fangs with the Frostfire Belt and just, sacrifice 100 DPS or whatever it ends up being on a simulation and just be happy that I'm using my own thing that I made myself with my own mats and everything like that and just be happy about that myself. So for me though, it literally goes Frostfire Belt, it goes Lariat, it goes Fang Adornments on weapon. The Silken Lining's really good too, but again, I'm just discounting that because I'm like very rarely above 90% health in my raids. So I'm like kind of discounting that one. And then you have like for me, it's like the Allied Risk Guards is then right there with those. Right after those three, it's like those three, and then the Allied Risk Guard's like really close too. And so it's like kind of a top four for me personally. And if I would feel comfortably with my simulations using any of those four. Obviously, like I said, the Frostfire Belt gets dropped down a little bit if you don't have the ring, or even the defensive ring, because defensive value is still value. So when you lose a little bit of that extra value, it does drop it down. But the big, and of course you have other things as well that can proc your rings, but obviously the belt is the one we're talking about because that's an actual embellishment, and the other things are just fire damage. So yeah, it makes it useful to use. I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if you have a ring, it makes it more useful to use, even though we're not major fire damage doers. In Mythic Plus, we do a decent amount because Radiant Decree is fire damage, right? And Truce Wake of the Radiant Decree is fire damage. But if you have a Grief Torch, that's doing fire damage. If you have Blazebinder's Hoof, that's doing fire damage on the blast. So you have many ways that you're doing fire damage in this expansion. So the ring is pretty good, even at like maybe a normal or heroic ring. It's still pretty good. And then of course, why are we talking about the ring? Because it then makes that embellishment better for the belt. So that's probably the things you should consider. As I mentioned, there's probably 4 or 5 that are fine. And if you want to use your engineering because you're an engineer, that's fine too. You're not going to be missing out on that much. This is not something that is like, oh, you have to use this one because it's 1,000 DPS more, which is something that happens a lot in World of Warcraft, of course. But that's not the case for this one. It's not like that. So you don't have too much to worry about here. You can wear what you want. But you know, if you do care about the min-maxing, I gave you the best information I could on that. So that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.